Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you today from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to welcome my fellow Jersey girl, Karen Olson, who is joining us from Springfield, New Jersey. There are moments in life when loss cracks us open long before we understand what it means to heal. For Karen, who is the founder and CEO emeritus of Family Promise, the national nonprofit that has mobilized more than 1 million volunteers to support homeless and low-income families, that moment came at age 12 when her mother died by suicide. That rupture reshaped Karen's world, leaving what she would later describe as a hole in her heart. Yet even in that early darkness, something quiet and resilient began to take root within Karen. A sensitivity to suffering, a deep instinct to reach towards others in pain, and the first glimmers of the compassion that would define her life's work. As Karen grew, that early grief became the emotional undercurrent of her identity. She built a successful career as a manager at Warner Lambert, but the ache of her childhood loss never fully receded. Instead, it shaped her into someone who noticed the invisible, who felt the weight of other people's stories, and who carried an unspoken longing for meaning and connection. That longing would rise to the surface in 1981 when a chance encounter with a homeless woman named Millie outside Grand Central Station in New York City awakened something profound in Karen, a sense of purpose that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless families across the country. From that moment on, Karen entered a new life chapter defined by service and renewal. She went on to found Family Promise, and her leadership has reshaped communities across the country, earning her national honors such as the Points of Light Award from President George H.W. Bush, the New Jersey Governor's Pride Award in Social Services, and the Jefferson Award for Public Service. But even as her impact grew, life delivered another profound turning point, a spinal cord injury that ushered Karen into a deeper vulnerability, mirroring the same cycle of rupture and rebirth that had marked her journey since childhood. I'm looking forward to talking with Karen about the defining moments that shaped her life, the loss of her mother, the unexpected encounter with Millie that actually redirected her purpose, and the injury that demanded yet another intervention and another reinvention. Each rupture became a doorway into deeper compassion, deeper service, and deeper humanity. Karen's journey reminds us that resilience is not a single act, but a continual becoming, that heartbreak can quietly usher in a new beginning, and that the hardest chapters often guide us toward the purpose we were meant to find. Hi there, and welcome to the international award-winning Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author, and trauma survivor, Irene Weinberg, here to support you wherever you are on your healing journey. Each week, I connect with leading grief and trauma experts, intuitive healers, mediums, and inspiring voices who share powerful stories of loss, resilience, and transformation. If you're searching for hope, meaning, and a path forward after loss or trauma, you're in the right place. Together, let's rediscover joy, healing, and the possibility of rebirth. And Karen, how can I relate to your story? A warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you, Irene. I'm delighted to be here.
It's my pleasure, truly. And we're going to help a lot of people today. Your story is very amazing and inspiring. So, a lot of people should become very inspired by what you have to say. I'm looking forward to sharing you with everyone. So the first question I have, let's have everybody understand your beginnings. How did losing your mother to suicide at such a formative age shape your early identity, creating what you describe as a hole in your heart? But it heightened your sensitivity to suffering, and it awakened your instinct to reach out to others in pain. Because you were very young. How old were you when your mom?
12.
Ugh. At such a formative time in your life, too.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk to us about that a little bit?
Yes, well, I was very close to my mother. My dad was an alcoholic, so that made me even closer, I would imagine, to my mother. And she was my best friend. We went to the beach and we swam together. We ice skated on the pond at the end of my street. She was my best friend. I loved her very, very much. I know that she was depressed because when I would come home from school, I would see that she was actually crying over the sink and her eyes were all swollen. And this went on for some time. And she was seeing a doctor, but she didn't get the treatment she really needed. And I didn't know what to do about that pain in her other than just tell her that I love her and so on. When I got a call, when I was in homeroom having my lunch, this was in 7th grade, someone from the office, one of the women from the office, came into the lunchroom and whispered something to Mr. Luce, who was head of the lunch. And he said, Karen, when you're through with your lunch, go to the office because they need you for something. And I thought, well, I haven't done anything wrong. I don't know what that is, and I got up to leave and he said, no, finish your ice cream sandwich, which I hadn't even begun. So I gulped that down and then I went into the office and the woman said, we were going to drive you home. You're needed at home. I said, okay. And I saw that she was very nervous in the car, talking to me, asking me questions. And anyhow, I arrived home and my grandmother was on the walkway and I wondered why she was there because my dad had dropped off at the train station earlier that morning to go to New York. My grandmother worked in Macy's. And she said to me, Mom had a nervous breakdown, but she'll be okay and she'll be home. She's just in the hospital now. And I thought, well, I wasn't too worried because I heard the nervous breakdown before and it seemed like maybe a lot of women in Darien had nervous breakdowns. So I expected her to be okay. But a few days later, I was sitting on the sofa where I usually sat with my mother watching TV. And my dad came in and he said to me, he just stood there and he said, Mommy died. And I became so upset. I just started pounding him on the chest. And he said, stop it, stop it. And then he gave me a pill and a Coca-Cola. He said, the doctor said to take this. And so just like that, I was out of it, must have been a very strong pill. But, which was not the thing to do. I think these days.
They were doubling the pain.
Yeah, exactly. And hiding the pain.
So how did your mom's death become this emotional backdrop for these later turning points that you had? The moments of shock or loss that ultimately deepened your compassion and sense of purpose. I mean, you had an encounter with Millie, and then you had to reinvent yourself again. So how did your mother, so they dulled your pain, but in what way did her death provide the backup for what would come next.
Well, I never really hurt when my mother was alive. I was just happy-go-lucky kid. And at her death, I experienced a great loss and sadness, and it didn't feel good to say the least. And so I became sensitive to other people's pain. I mean, I went through something and I really, really hurt, and I could sensitize the pain in others. And right away, I always wanted to help fix their pain. And one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to become a nurse. That was my plan of helping people. But my dad, I wanted to become a nurse. But my dad was married, and my stepmother said to me, Karen, you don't have what it takes to be a nurse. You'll never be a nurse.
Oh my
I was a
God.
nurse. Yeah, I was a nurse. So right there, later it turned out well that I didn't become a nurse. And then she persuaded my father not to send me to nursing school. So just like that, my dream was shattered because
Just like that, you had the evil stepmother too, in addition to all of your other problems.
it's true, yeah. But she didn't show the world that she was an evil stepmother. That was another face she wore when she was outside. So I was very sad not to be able to become a nurse. And so I later studied business administration. And the first job I got was with a printing firm. And then from there, I got a job with Don Jagoda Associates in New York City, who was a promotional agency. And I enjoyed that. And then I went to Warner Lambert. So all the while I'm enjoying the career, and I was being promoted, and I enjoyed working with my colleagues. I enjoyed the creativity, but yet I was yearning for something more in my heart. But my dream of becoming a nurse was not there. But yet still I wanted to do something more. And then one day my life changed when I was going to a meeting in New York City, and I was about to pass a woman who sat outside Grand Central Station on a crate, and I'd seen her before, and I passed by. But on this particular day, I felt I would just get her something. So I ran across the street into a deli and got her a ham and cheese sandwich and orange juice. And when I came back to her, and she was frail and elderly, she was probably in her late 70s, and I gave her the sandwich, and she said, "Thank you so much. I haven't had anything to eat since yesterday."
Oh my
And
gosh.
I ended up staying there, and immediately it was just two women in New York City on the street talking to each other. And the fact that she was homeless, that all disappeared in my mind. She was just a woman who was hurting. And from there, I told my two sons about Millie, and they said, Mom, let's go into New York and find more people like Millie and give them sandwiches. So we did. We first made 25 sandwiches and went to Central Park and rollerbladed and gave out the sandwiches. But we gave them out all too quickly. So the next time we went in, the next Sunday, we made 75 sandwiches. And that became, I realized, a vehicle to say I cared. Because how, when you see homeless people, can you say you care? I needed the sandwich as a vehicle to say I cared. And we met people by first name. Lucille, who lived under the escalator with her little kitten, and Abe, who was a photography salesman, and John, who was a World War II veteran, and they became our friends. So at that point, I was living in two worlds. I was living in a world that's bustling and making money, and for me. And then I lived in another world where the real world for me was relating to people and trying to ease pain.
That's beautiful. And there's another thing I want to ask you, that you also had a moment, you were married, and you had a moment in your marriage when you were battling depression and anxiety. which sounds to me like a lot of unresolved grief. And how did you come to realize that you'd never really grieved your mother's death?
I'm not sure I ever did realize. I don't know. I've overcome it, but yet there's still a part of me that has that pain. And that pain, though, is creative because it sensitizes me to reach out to others. So I've overcome it, but there's still some scar tissue there that's actually very creative because it allows me to sensitize the grief or sadness other people are going through.
Which is a beautiful thing because you can employ that experience to help others, to have compassion for others. But I'd also like to talk to you about, you began to heal a bit when your father came to the hospital to see you and embraced you. Do you want to tell us about that story and how that shifted something inside of you? I think that's connected to when you started to deal with your grief.
Yeah, that was like being in a dark room with no windows, and then all of a sudden, all the blinds go up and the sunshine comes in, and it was just a complete change. And, he embraced me, which he never did, And the doctor said, well, Karen, because there wasn't any plans for me to go home, said, well, Karen, I think it's time for you to go home. And I said, yes, And so that opened, but I felt like I was instantly healed, really. It wasn't through any talk therapy or any kind of medication. The embrace by my father maybe was something I was looking for my whole life because he had always been very critical of me, like, for God's sake, Karen, can't you do anything right,
Oh my God, that's so just negative and destructive to a child.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'd clean the coffee table and I thought it looked beautiful and I used Pledge to shine it and he'd find one little problem with the table
that's
and
terrible.
say, for God's sake, Karen, can't you do anything right? So I was always trying to win my father's approval. And so here he embraced me and that meant the world to me. It was like coming home to myself, really. And so then
did he say anything to you when he embraced you? Did he acknowledge or own anything that had happened before? Or
no.
Wow.
It's hard for him to put words to it, I guess, but it meant a lot. It meant a lot to me.
It meant a lot to you. And at least he finally saw you and he saw what you were going through and he was witnessing you. I'm sure that was really important, right? So how did your encounter with Millie lead to family purpose?
Family promise.
Family promise.
It's also a purpose, a big purpose.
It's also your purpose. That's how I'm thinking it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I then began to volunteer in New Jersey, and that's where I met homeless families who had been living in their cars. They were in shelters. And, when you say the word homeless, you think of that man on the street lying on the subway grate. You don't think of families because you don't really see homeless families. They're not living on the street. But I met them and I realized that the main issue was, low incomes that resulted in losing their housing. And they were then doubled or tripled up with friends or family members or staying in shelter. And so I thought, does the religious community know about homeless families? And if they did, would they want to help? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. I planned a conference on family homelessness, and I expected about 100 to come. The 200 people came to an all-day conference on family homelessness, and that really kicked off what I was going to do, because we then looked for a building for shelter, and not one building was available, and not one church or synagogue could provide for a full-time shelter. So we came up with a plan, which was to house homeless families in our places of worship for a week at a time on rotation with each other. So that meant, say, the Presbyterian Church in Summit, New Jersey would house homeless families 4 times a year, not a burdensome responsibility. And that drew so many people to this program. And not only did they offer care and support. Of course, we had social workers too, but it was the healing of acceptance of having the families come into the place of worship, and that's where they would stay for a week, and the volunteers brought their children. So it was very much like a home-like atmosphere. And then, but other communities were interested in Essex County and in Morris County. We helped them develop their program. And then I got calls from Columbus, Ohio, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So this was a good thing. There was not only were the people experiencing homelessness that were hurting, but there was a hurt in the people's heart who wanted to make a difference, and that allowed them to make a difference in their own religious congregation.
See how you inspired people, and like one person does something. I'm experiencing it with this podcast. You do something out of your kindness, and like people resonate with it, and it helps so many people. It's such a blessing.
Grow, yeah. But the thing is that people really want to help and basically are compassionate, but they need to be shown a way to serve, and this
That's right.
Provided a way, and then it grew more and more. Then I was able to hire a staff, and I had people go out. We would do needs assessments. College interns would do those needs assessments, and then we would go to that community like Sacramento and introduce the program to clergy. And then after that, there would be a big community meeting, which I would speak at, and then we would help them organize. And
wonderful.
Give them, yeah, so it happened all organically, but it's like when you're going down a path.
It's sort of like you're birthing a child, and the child grows, and they have their infancy, and then their toddler, and and you are birthing this beautiful family promise. And I know that you have two stories. One is about someone named Hope, and another is about someone named Pace, that kind of capture the heart of a lot of the good that Family Promise did. So would you like to tell us about those two stories?
Yeah, well, Hope lived in Cranford, and she was a waitress, and she had a daughter, and Olivia. But one morning, Hope woke up, and her eyes were all blurry, like if she was like looking out of a windshield that had been frosted, and she couldn't see. And so after a while, she had to stop working, and she wasn't working, so she didn't have any money coming in. And then, she got behind in her rent, and eventually she was evicted. And that's when she found Family Promise, and she received their hope, looking forward to a brighter future.
When did she discover she had a bacterial infection that was making her eyes bleed?
Yeah. I don't know what that was, but it was an infection, and it went away. But she also met some wonderful people in the program. She met two volunteers, Lou and April, who helped her eventually find a job. And they also became Olivia, that was her daughter's godparents. So it goes, if you say this is just about shelter, that really is not the whole story. It's really about relationship and the healing that comes when caring people can help one another. And that's really the beauty. Because
it's two-pronged, it seems to me. You're helping people, you're protecting them and helping them by finding housing, which is taking care of their basic needs, but you're connecting with them relationship-wise, which is feeding them and taking care of them in many other ways. Right?
That's very true. And then it grows.
Then it grows. That's right. Yeah. And other people see that, and it redounds in all different ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Like this one volunteer would come and do haircuts for everybody, and another volunteer would repair cars. So within the ministry of Family Promise, there are other ministries that are created by volunteers.
Well, Pace is an example of that, right?
Yes. Pace, he said he only had time for three things in his life: work, church, and family. But on this one particular day, he was driving and he saw a woman who was stranded on the right side of the road, and she couldn't get her car started. And so Pace stopped and helped, and she was then on her way. She was getting very panicky as she sat on the right side of the road with the cars whizzing by her. And then this car pulled up and a man got out, and she recognized him as Pace from work. And because Alice worked at the same place, Sandia Labs, and he changed the tire, and then he was on his way. He didn't think anything of it until he was given a going away party because he's going to change departments. And a lot of people gathered, and Pace said he became so bored with all the suits coming up there and saying the traditional stuff. And then Alice got up there and said how much it helped her by him changing the tire, and sounded that it really did care. And when Pace heard how much of a difference he made in just changing a tire and what it meant to her, he had to take another look at how he was and what he was doing. And then he began to volunteer in his church, a Methodist church that happened to be a Family Promise participating congregation. And he started out as a volunteer, and then he became a coordinator, and then he did more. He had some of the guests in the program back to his house, and they went on a zip line, which boosted their confidence. And then he and his wife took them on all different kinds of outings, and so it grew and grew. And
so your purpose helped to grow his purpose.
Exactly.
And helped to do that for many other people.
Right.
Right?
That's a ripple effect.
Yes, yes. You inspired him, and look at how many more people he helped thanks to you.
Right.
What happened for you.
Yeah. And then he said in the end that he had a renewed heart, and
beautiful.
So it changed him, and then he changed other lives. So there's a tremendous ripple effect when you do something. You
Absolutely.
Never know where it's going to go.
We're two examples of that, perfect examples. And I really want everybody, if you're listening to Karen's story, you understand that she's got a pattern of she has a loss, she reflects, she reinvents herself, and she goes towards service. Now she had a second major loss, the spinal cord injury that she's been dealing with, and explain how that deepened your understanding of your first loss and reshaped your advocacy, your purpose, and your message, because losses differ, but they all involve grief and coping and all of that. So would you like to tell us about that part of your life, which you're now grappling with, your spinal cord injury, and how that redirected your life even more?
Are you familiar with cryotherapy?
No, tell us about that.
Okay. Well, cryotherapy is cold air therapy, and you enter a chamber and it gets very, very cold. The treatment is supposed to be for not more than 3 minutes.
And what was it for you? Why were you using this therapy?
Why was I using it?
What brought you there?
Well, I felt good, but I thought it would make me feel even more energetic.
Oh, you had heard about it, so you're going to try it.
Yeah, I'd heard about it. And so I did it about 30 times between Summit, New Jersey and Miami. And but this particular day I was in Miami Beach and had a cryotherapy appointment. And when I went to the desk, the woman at the desk said, "Well, you'll have a new therapist today. She's been on board for 4 weeks, but she's been very well trained." And so I accepted that, which I probably shouldn't have. But the temperature got so cold, unbearably cold, colder than it's supposed to be. And later the EMT said I had hypothermia. But I kept saying, I'm cold, I'm so cold, which I don't remember. That was less.
She left you in too long, it sounds like.
She made the temperature too cold.
And you were in
So,
too long.
at about a minute, I said, I'm cold, I'm cold. And so she went to help me out of the door, but she opened the door, but she stood behind the door and I was frozen. So I
Oh,
fell out like a popsicle
oh my gosh.
and I hit my head on a raised ledge.
Oh my
And
God.
I was still conscious, but I couldn't feel anything from my neck down. And everybody was screaming. And then the rescue squad came and they took me to the hospital. But when I fell, I had the presence of mind to ask for my phone. So I called my two sons and they came down right away. And I had surgery, and that was just in the nick of time. So I wasn't fully paralyzed. I'm better today, and I can even take some steps with a walker and the help of my therapist. But my right side is not good. My right arm I can't lift, and my right leg is a little weak. But I was just glad to, get the help and come out of it. And the thing is, when I came out of it, I was met with an extended family. I have an amazing team of aides who were just wonderful, like therapy. And then Jen Rustum, who you just met briefly. She's my assistant and does all kinds of amazing things well beyond her stated job title and what she's supposed to be doing. She's just so, I came out to this wonderful extended family on the other side. I still had my family, my two sons and my five grandchildren, but I was blessed with this extended family. So I just felt love and nurtured all the time. I feel
Well, it
that.
feels like
So,
all the love you gave out and all the ways you helped all these homeless people, in a way, spirit returned it to you with all the kindness and all the help that you've been getting after
mhm,
this happened.
that's true.
You are
So
getting back what you put out and more, which is beautiful, which is
I think
wonderful.
so, yeah.
It's
So people, but I'm still Karen. Even the only thing that's changed is I can't walk, but I'm the same person. And I just experience a lot of joy,
that's
and
beautiful. Did you have problems blaming the woman who she must have felt terrible?
well, she
But
did, but no, I didn't blame her at all, not for 1 second. And I'm glad that she called. She wanted to know how I was doing. And I said, I'm doing fine, I'm making progress and I feel good. And she said, oh, I'm so glad because I was blaming myself. And I said, no, don't blame yourself at all. You weren't probably given the training you needed, but I'm fine. And she felt so relieved because she had felt so depressed up until the time she called me, which was about 3 weeks after my accident.
and you were not completely okay, and you could have carried on with her, but you didn't, and that was a loving
But
choice that you made.
yeah, but what would that serve? And I didn't feel
Right.
any of that in my heart, really. Again, it was just thinking about someone who felt guilty and I wanted to help her.
And once again,
Yeah.
you reached out with love and you let her off the hook, which is beautiful.
Hmm.
Beautiful. So, what, tell us about your book, Meant for More. And it's
That's what I'll
called For
hold it
Others
up.
to Discover Meaning Through Helping Others. There it is.
Yeah.
Would you like to
Okay.
tell us about it?
Yes. It's a book a little bit about my life. And just what we talked about, overcoming the hurdles and experiencing extended love and joy. But it's also about others' pace and other. But it's also about guests in our program, homeless families, and volunteers. And it helps you think about being happy with who you are, but knowing that you can overcome trials. You can. I guess I've always been feeling a certain spirituality. I've never considered myself a religious person, but
But
I sometimes get,
spirituality isn't about religion, it's about a
no,
belief that we have purpose, that our bodies die, but our souls go on.
I
It's
know,
not about
yeah,
religion that way at all.
that's right.
That we're all
And
the same, which is you helping the homeless is such an example of that. We're part of a collective.
hmm
And that, and
yeah.
that's what spirituality is really more about,
hmm
So let
And
me, right?
so I have this spirituality. I really feel like a spiritual being having a human experience.
You are.
Uh, I'm very in touch with my spirit, and that's my home. And so I'm here in human form. So it sounds like I know all the answers. I do not. But
Well, that's why we have Grief and Rebirth podcast, because with all the people who I'm interviewing, people will get many of their answers that have been
mhm,
unanswered. But when I interview grief and trauma specialists and healers and mediums and people like you who have gone through so much and come through, your role models for getting through the trauma and still being able to have joy in your life again and doing your healing. That's what this podcast is all about. And it helps. That's why, just like what you've done for the homeless, it's helping people and anyone who is curious about the world of the homeless and want to be inspired should get Karen's book. It's a beautiful book. I had the privilege of reading parts of it, Meant for More, and it's really wonderful. And Karen, speaking of healing, with all the pain you've been through, you say that it has a silver lining. For you, what has that been?
well, the death of my mother, my accident, and other right. Well, the death of my mother, my accident, but there's a silver lining in those, especially from silver lining of my mother committing suicide. That was very, very, very painful, of course, and still is at some level. But in it, there was a silver lining, and the silver lining is that you're part of a family and you have more in common with people than not. And so, give and love. I don't know, it changed my life. The silver lining is it gave me purpose and the purpose was like I wanted to be before a nurse, and that door was closed. But a bigger, way bigger door opened, allowing me to care for others because I was sensitized to the hurt that I experienced when my mother died.
Which is
But there
beautiful.
was a silver lining in that it opened up my sensitivities to help others. And so one thing after another, and then giving the sandwich to Millie, and that opened another door and another door. And so I found a silver lining.
Which is beautiful, which I can also say I relate to you because I had the terrible car accident. My husband died next to me and all of that. And I got the messages. I had a spiritual awakening, and look at what's opened up as a result of all of that. So in many ways, we're on a similar path. And my important final question is, what is your tip for finding joy in life? With all you've been through, you can still find joy and be happy and not dwell on your problems. How do you do that?
It's not how I do it. It just happens. I take joy in maybe the little things. There's a park near my apartment, and I ride around the park. I say hello to people that I know. I also enjoy painting. You can see some of the paintings on the wall behind me. I did those one before my accident, and so I'm right-handed, but I can't use my right arm. But I found a way that I can paint with my left arm. So I really enjoy the painting.
That's marvelous.
Yeah.
So you get joy from that, and it's wonderful. And you get joy from all the people you continue to help, because I know you're still involved with your organization. Right? In closing, Karen, I want to share this poignant passage from your book, Meant for More, with our compassionate Grief and Rebirth podcast audience. Quote, looking back on my life, I can see my spirit has been made stronger by my family, our guests, our volunteers, and all the selfless, compassionate people and organizations in this world. I know myself as Karen, a spiritual being. I challenge you to respect that we are all connected, take the path to your destiny, Be a North Star for someone. See the problems in this world, instill hope, fulfill your longing, and have an expansive heart. I dare you to take a different road. Find your Millie, your catalyst to be the change. Be a kind individual. Give someone a fresh start and offer unexpected healing. Karen, thank you for reminding us that grief doesn't just mark an ending. It can also open us to a deeper, more compassionate way of being in the world. And loss, when met with challenge, can become a doorway to profound service and rebirth. From my heart, I wish you good health and abundant blessings always.
Thank you, Irene. I've enjoyed our chat, and I hope others that are listening on have enjoyed it as well.
I'm sure that many more from listening to this interview will be inspired to find a new path for themselves or to heal the current path that they're on. So thank you so much. And as I like to say, to be continued. Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at griefandrebirth.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel at Healing from Grief and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to www.amazon.com/shop/Irene S. Weinberg to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon.